friends, welcome to this week's episode of the Me and Re podcast. I'm your host, Reanna Hoffman, and we are going to be continuing with our Dear Younger Me series. I have my friend Ellen on with us. Ellen, can you introduce yourself to us?
Yes, I'd love to. My name's Ellen Hembree. I am married to my best friend Brandon. We live here in the Fredericksburg region, and we've been church planting together since we were married, so since 2012-ish. So that's been awesome. We have 3 kids, and we homeschool them, which has been an adventure in and of itself. We started that this year, and other than that, if I have free time, I like to read, I like to run, I like to be active, I like to be with people individually as an introvert and not in giant groups as an extrovert. But yeah, it's a little bit about me.
I love that. I love that you said that Brandon was your best friend. That made me smile. And your children are lovely and they make me giggle because they run
Well,
at me on Sunday mornings. One
yeah,
of them
they do.
literally I catch midair every week. So they're great and wonderful. You said you have been planning churches since you guys got married, pretty much. And you weren't quite 25 yet, right? When y'all started all this craziness?
Yeah, 23, 24, when we got started.
So, what advice would you give your 25-year-old self about navigating challenges and uncertainties? Because, by golly, planning a church is a definite uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. I've been thinking a lot about that. I think that these are lessons that I didn't learn as a 25-year-old. I didn't learn them as a 35-year-old. I'm still learning them, but the biggest thing is probably not to people please, not to live my life for the approval of other people, um, not to appease feelings that could give rise to conflict, or feel like I have to be the one to appease feelings that give rise to conflict. And a lot of times, um, I have to be at peace with the fact that conflict is just going to exist. And that's not something that's necessarily bad. It's something that's human, and it's something that the Lord is big enough to handle. But I think the younger me was very worried about conflict, very scared of conflict to the point where I would avoid it at all costs, and often maybe even leave like my husband to clean up the mess instead of being there with him, being brave, being courageous, pointing people to Christ in the midst of conflict. I think I missed a lot of those types of opportunities, um, because I was just a very scared people pleaser. And I think I would tell my younger self that that's not something you're going to get over instantly, but it is something that you can work on, and over time, the Lord will heal you from it, and He will give you increments of courage that you didn't have before, and He will eventually, over time, change you into a person who may still not like it, but who is brave enough to face it, and who is brave enough to not be loved by every single person on the planet. But I think as you plant churches, as you make disciples, as you do the things that Jesus calls you to do, and as you ask God to make you more like Jesus, He's going to answer that prayer to make you more like Jesus. And Jesus wasn't loved by everybody. He wasn't everybody's favorite person. In fact, they killed him. So I think that's just something like I had to learn through a lot of hard situations. Um, and like I said, I'm still like kind of coming through a lot of those lessons, but I think the Lord has given me um, a lot of courage that I didn't have before. I think maybe just a lot of wherewithal that I didn't have before to withstand a lot of these, things of like, well, this is truth and I'm going to stand on truth.
Yeah.
Um, and Probably just with age comes, some of that experience. But I would definitely tell my younger self to, try to work through it, like whatever that looks like. Maybe it's talking to somebody, maybe it's, um, you know, facing it head on. I don't know. I don't know what it would have looked like for 25-year-old me to be told to work through it and be patient with yourself and give yourself grace for it. But that's probably what I would have done.
That was fantastic, and I will be replaying that part of this conversation in my head over and over and over again. As you were talking, I was like, ooh, I need this posted on my wall so I can stare at it because it was like, that's fantastic. As a not 25-year-old, but almost a 25-year-old, like
Mm-hmm.
26-ish, I'm definitely learning that in this season about people pleasing and about confrontation because the introvert, as you are, am one of those people that are like, hi, yeah, totally, whatever you need, go for it. And it could be
Mm-hmm.
at the complete detriment of myself or whatever we are doing around us. And I
Mm-hmm.
love that you said that the Lord's going to give courage and has given increments of courage
Mm-hmm.
because that is so true. There's moments that I feel like spicy is what I call it. And I'm like, okay, here's the truth. And this is what the truth says. And this is the conversation we're having. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's other times that I'm like, I'm a doormat and I'm going to stay over here. And Philip, who is my cleaner of messes, is going to go take care of that because I just don't have it in me today. So
Mm-hmm.
I love that you made the comment to take courage and that the Lord's going to give it when you need it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that we can trust in him to do that for us because, people didn't like him either and he was killed for it. And that was so true, is so true. And I think a lot of times people that grew up in the church like me are like Jesus, the most lovable person on the planet, which is true,
Mm-hmm.
was also the most hated person on the planet at
Mm-hmm.
exactly the same time. And I think we are having to learn how to hold that in the same place because both are true.
Right.
And
Right.
so people think the same things about us. And the
Mm-hmm.
only thing we get to determine is how we think of ourselves
Mm-hmm.
because what everybody else thinks about us doesn't necessarily matter.
Yeah.
Now, if we're doing something incorrectly, we do need people to call us out on it. But that's a discipleship relationship, not a, hi, friend, so I don't like the color of your shirt. I'm going to tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really the conversation we're having here.
Right.
It's the people were loved and hated at the same time, just like Jesus was. And if we're called to be like Jesus, there are definitely going to be people that don't necessarily love us.
Right.
And so I love that you said all of that. Or that's what I gleaned from everything you said.
Yeah. Good.
Go ahead.
Good. I'm glad. I'm glad you cleaned all that.
I did. I swear. I was like, "Oh, this is good." As we continue, before I
Mm-hmm.
sideswipe us, what would you tell yourself about finding purpose and staying true to your values?
Mm. Um, I think that you are, especially like in your mid 20s, but honestly, at any phase in your adult life, like I don't think this is relegated simply to quote unquote young adults. Um, but I think that as you are growing, as you're able to take on more responsibility, as you're able to, explore what your giftings are, like people ask more of you. And that's not true simply in the church world. That's true in the corporate world. That's true, as your families grow, like your kids are going to ask more of you, etc. And so, um, one of the things that my husband and I did this past fall ish time frame is took a sabbatical from ministry, and it was so incredible. It was really healthy for us to really stop and examine where are the areas in our life that we are seeing fruit from our ministry, and where are areas that maybe we're pouring in, but we're pouring in because we feel like we have to pour in, not necessarily because those are the areas that are bearing fruit, or because those are the areas like we really are passionate and feel like the Lord is leading us to pour into those.
Hey friends, I just wanted to invite you to the coolest thing that we are doing this March. We are starting book club. What book are we reading? We are going to start Jess Connolly's Breaking Free from Body Shame on March 3rd, and we're going to read it through June 2nd. You're like, Reanna, that's a long time. People, I know we have lives and I know we have extra things going on. So I wanted to give us enough time to not only read it, but to reflect on it and digest what we are chatting about and reading through. So we're going to have a private Facebook group for our listeners here on the podcast. It's called Breaking Free from Body Shame Book Club, as we can tell, but there's a link in the show notes, and it's exclusive for our listeners so that we can not only read this book together, there will be a reading plan there, as well as questions we're going to ask throughout the week. And you can get all of this information as well as the link on my website, reannahoffman.com/book club. So you're going to want to go there. There's the link to purchase the book. There's the link to join the Facebook group. And there's a link to our reading guide. So I can't wait for you guys to join us, and let's get back to our conversation.
And kind of going back to your question of what would you do to remain true to your values, like, values are good, values are important, like have them, absolutely, but also like know where the Lord is working, and I would say like pray through like, you know, are my personal values in alignment with what God is doing in my life. Um, because if God is moving and active in my life in something that I'm not giving much time to, maybe I need to re examine my time and my priorities and what I'm doing to give, what I'm giving my time towards. And so I would say, like, as you're looking at where God's moving, where you're seeing fruit from your life, like as you're serving the Lord, um, that should really determine what gets priority and what doesn't. And, I think it's really easy to, like I said, as we grow, as we get older, as people place more on us, as people have more demands of us, like it's really easy to just say yes because we're maybe told we're supposed to say yes, or we think that if we don't, we're going to let people down again with the people pleasing thing. And the truth is, like, you could actually be robbing somebody else of something that God's calling them to do, instead of being faithful with what God has called you to do. And if you are able to take a step back and able to pray through, what are the areas in my life that I feel like God is bearing fruit, or what are the areas in my life that like I know He's calling me to, and I'm perhaps being disobedient, like what are they, and give those your time. Then I think your values will follow that, and that will shape like what you're able to say yes and no to, and not therefore burn out because you're doing what God has called you to do.
Yeah. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What does fruit necessarily look like when we say that it's bearing fruit? Do you have
Yeah.
any examples of what that might look like?
So my definition would come from Matthew 28 in the Great Commission, where Jesus says, "Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, teaching them to do everything I've commanded you, and remember, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age." Um, so my definition of fruit is you're seeing disciples made, like from your life, whatever it looks like, whether you're going into corporate America every day and you're able to lead a Bible study, or you're able to have spiritual conversations with people who like I would never reach, or whether it is this, this podcast, or maybe you're a foreign missionary, I don't know. But when I think of fruit, my first thought is a life that is making disciples. And so for me, that looks like there are women that I meet with like very consistently, um, and like challenging them to not just like learn about Jesus and not just have this time where we meet and we study the Bible together, but also challenge them to say, okay, now who are you discipling, or who in your life exists that maybe like you're not discipling yet, but you should. And so if I'm seeing fruit from those spiritual relationships, then I'm seeing disciples being made. And that's when I'm saying that, that is what I'm thinking. Um, and I know other people perhaps may, see fruit as something different, but I think Jesus would, um, based on everything that he says, like you can tell a tree by its fruit. And fruit in Jesus's terms were not any materialistic goods. They were people. They were the disciples that he was making, the people that he was pouring into. The kingdom of heaven come to earth is through his people. And so that's when I think of fruit, I'm thinking directly like in terms of disciple making.
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Because I know sometimes, especially growing up in the church, you think fruit and you're like, okay, fruit. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
sure, fruit. And then I know recently a friend and I were doing a study about the fruits of the Spirit, or the
Mm-hmm.
fruit of the Spirit. It's just one, not multiple. But some, and all of that, the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self control, all of that is exuded from people.
Right.
So it's the
Mm-hmm.
same, kind of the same vein. So thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, of course.
Do you have any wisdom or a lesson that you've learned or a piece of advice that you think every young adult should hear?
Every young adult should hear. Um, yeah. Um, I think I think one of the best things that I did as a young adult. And this was only by God's grace because I wasn't all into following Jesus when I first moved to the DC region in the way that, I am now. But um, is to find a local church and ask how you can serve. And I say that because when I first moved to the DC area, I was very lonely. Like I didn't have very much of a community, and I was in a place in my life where I had a lot of extra time. I had a lot of extra resources. Like I had, a space that I was living in that I could host people. I had even extra finances, like I could cover dinner for people. I just had these things that you don't necessarily have as you get older. Those things change. And so as a young adult, I think um, we are kind of often programmed to be like, well, what can the church do for me? But you can do so much for the kingdom of God. Um, in fact, like, I was thinking through some of the things that Jesus perhaps might say to young adults. And the only thing that came to mind was when Jesus looked at the rich young ruler and said, now go sell everything you have and follow me. And the rich young ruler went away sad because he didn't want to do that. And so, like, Jesus's call to young people is not to say, like, go find the right program or go do X, Y, and Z for you know for whatever. His call is to for them to give up what is important to them, their money, their time, and to serve him. And so my advice to young adults right now would be to do that. Like, maybe it doesn't look like, selling everything, but maybe it does. Like, I've known several young adults who in their 20s, like, quit their jobs, sold their stuff, and went overseas, and God has richly, richly blessed them. Like, and so I don't know what it looks like, but I do know that a consumeristic mindset is not the answer. But a mindset that says, I'm here to serve the local church. I'm here to serve Jesus by serving the local church. Like, that is going to be a huge blessing, especially to a church that maybe doesn't look quite the way you would want it to look, but is yet trying to serve the community, is yet trying to make disciples. And those are the churches that I think young adults need to plug into because they're needed. Their gifts and their talents are needed in those types of communities.
Yeah. Do you have any tips for joining a local church? Like, I know sometimes it's very hard to walk in the doors
Mm-hmm.
and you have no idea what you're walking into. You get hugged by this weird older dude
Mm-hmm.
that smells like peppermints, and then you have to go find your spot, and you're like, okay, I did the thing. What do I
Yeah.
do now?
Yeah, no, I know for me when I first went to this church, it was in Manassas, Virginia. And like I said, I didn't really know anybody. Um, I would say give it 3 Sundays in a row. Like I would say try it, try it, try it. Like um, I don't think that I think some churches do a great job doing first impressions, plugging you in, like connecting you. Some churches do a fantastic job of that, and I think some don't. And so, but that doesn't necessarily equate to like a poor spiritual development or things like that. I think it equates to just maybe that's they're rusty and they haven't had a chance to talk through some of those issues. But um, I would say give it 3 Sundays. And I would also say, like, again, try really hard to, like, not have a consumeristic mindset. Because I think even if you go in saying, oh, like, I didn't feel greeted, well, yeah, yeah, it's not all about you. Like,
Yeah.
like, try to greet someone else, see what happens if, like, you're the one who reaches out. And I know that that can be hard on a Sunday when you're exhausted or perhaps you're, like, alone. Um, but like I think that's where giving it 3 Sundays in a row can help too. Um, and also like if you can go with a friend, like if you can get somebody to go with you, like I think that's a really important piece too, because the worst that could happen is neither of you end up staying, you end up going to a different church. The best thing is like you and your friend both have found a new church home and you're able to connect together. So I would say don't give up after the first try. Um, But I would also say, like, just going in knowing that um, not there's no such thing as a perfect church. Like, there's just not. But there is such a thing as a community that desires to honor the Lord. And so, like, pray and ask God to give you those spiritual eyes. Like, Lord, is this a place where, like, it may not look pretty, but you're being glorified? Or, like, it may not be done exactly the way I would do it, but, like, they're trying, and I actually can see places where I can help them. So, like, those types of prayers God loves to answer because they further his kingdom. And so if you pray those prayers before you go in, like, he's faithful to show you um, yes or no. And so I think having, like I said, those mindsets and that prayer life that's actively, like, open, like, walking through church doors with open eyes, instead of, kind of a closed off, like, what is in it for me, makes a big difference.
I love that. That was really, really good advice. Ellen, is there anything else you want to share with us? Because you have been given all the tips and tricks and all the wisdom.
Oh man, I think just know that everything changes too. Everything's in a season, and so, like, what you can do for the Lord, and you're, like I said, in your 20s, is not going to be the same as what you can do for the Lord in your early 30s with one and a half kids, or whatever, whenever you choose to have children or don't have children. But my point is that phases of life change, and so, like, um, know that and don't hold yourself to the same, like, expectations. Like, kind of hold, like, the gifts and talents God's given you with an open hand, and trust that he'll keep providing opportunities as you go.
That was so good and so true in a not fun but fun way. Because different seasons are like, okay, Lord, what are we doing now? Like,
Right.
what's the plan? But that's very, very true. Well,
Mm.
friends, thank you so much for joining us on the Me and Reed podcast. Ellen, you are a gem and a jewel, and I love you. And this was fantastic, and I will be re-listening to this multiple times because you gave some really good wisdom. I might make it a print and hang it on my wall.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
if I do that, I'll email it to you and be like, "Hi, I made this for my wall. This was what you said." But well, I'm gonna leave my information in the show notes. I'll leave Ellen's information in the show notes, like her social media if she left it. If not, you can leave a comment in Spotify and Apple Podcast and YouTube. And if you're like, hey, Ellen, I have a question, I will be more than happy to get that question to Ellen and get that answered for you. If you're like, hey, Reanna, I have a question and I don't want to leave it here, feel free to DM me on Instagram. My Instagram is Reanna, REANNA.IVEY.Hoff, and I will be more than happy to answer whatever questions you have, as long as they're within reason, if that makes sense. There will be a poll. There will be a poll because the Ellen family, the Hembree family, has a adorable golden doodle, right? Chipper's a golden
Yeah,
doodle.
he is a golden doodle. Yeah,
So
a
I'm
black
gonna
golden
leave.
doodle.
Yes, I'm gonna leave Chipper. It's the Chipper Doodle is their Instagram. So I'm gonna leave that in the show notes because you need some Chipper Doodle in your life, and we will have a poll about the best kind of dog.
He'll
So
appreciate
there
that.
might be a no dog option, but there will be Chipper Doodle, Golden Doodles, another option, and then no dog because that's what Philip said because he said he likes cats. So be sure to jump on that poll. Also, in case you didn't know, you can follow the podcast. The more followers we get, the more people get to learn about Jesus and what he's doing. It also helps other people see this post. So if you're not following, you should. If you haven't given us a review, you should do that too. And you should share with your friends because Ellen gave us some really, really, really good tips. So whether you're 20, 25, 30, 45, 105, everybody can benefit from what Ellen told us. So I hope you guys have a great day, and I can't wait to see you later. Bye, friends.